In a land of sunshine where the palm trees sway, there's a special show to brighten up your day. From rockin' festivals to Broadway dreams, tune in with Bonnie G. It's a desert scene. The desert scene with Bonnie G. Meet the stars and feel the beat. From the Coachella Valley is the place to be, for all the culture, fun, and harmony. The desert scene, yeah, with Bonnie G.
Mutual Broadcasting welcomes you to the Desert Scene, featuring conversations with the people who make culture, art, and entertainment happen in the Coachella Valley. From local theater to live music, art exhibits to cinema and beyond. The Desert Scene is presented by El Portal Mexican Restaurant in Cathedral City. Now, here is your host, Bonnie G.
And welcome to the Desert Scene. Very happy to have you here, and very happy to welcome to the show today David Perry, who's a buddy of mine, a wonderful PR guy, and an author, a very successful author. His novel, critically acclaimed mystery thriller Upon This Rock, is just doing so well. Hey, David, how are you?
Ahoy, good morning. Excuse me, I had a little bit of a frog in my throat. I'm reporting today from our other city that we both love, San Francisco, just a little bit north of us.
All right. What's the weather like there?
It is one of those glorious cloudless days in San Francisco, just a little bit of a holiday nip in the air. It's really beautiful. Union Square is full of people, shoppers. Last night, the skaters were out. It was drag queens on ice night at the ice rink. So it was a very San Francisco Christmas experience.
Oh, that's great. That's fabulous. So what's happening with Upon This Rock, which is a wonderful book. First of all, for people who maybe haven't read it and don't know much about it, tell people a little bit about Upon This Rock.
Well, thank you very much, Bonnie. I really appreciate all your support since the book came out. Upon This Rock is a murder mystery thriller set in the beautiful Italian hilltop town of Orvieto, halfway between Rome and Florence. And two young men stumble upon a mystery, a suicide of a young priest. Or is it really a suicide? And in the course of 1 month over the Christmas season, it's set during the Christmas holidays in Orvieto, they uncover a human trafficking plot and maybe even an attempt to blow up St. Peter's Church. So it's got great reviews. Armistead Maupin, thank you very much, gave it my favorite review. He called it an elegant, twisty thriller. And Fenton Johnson called it the gay Da Vinci Code, but a lot better. And the New York Journal of Books said that it was a thrilling mystery. So the reviews were great, and it has just now gone into its second printing. It's the best-selling book ever from my publisher, Linden Publishing, a California publisher. And my screenwriter, Rodney Vance, is shopping it around in the hopes of, knock wood, getting it picked up by Netflix or something like that. So if there's anyone out there who's a showrunner, and if you're a Hollywood person, you know what that means, please give me a call, because it's a hot property and we would love to see it on the big screen, because the sequel is in the works.
Yeah, I mean, I did read it. I think it would make an excellent movie. Absolutely, it would be terrific. So I'm looking at this. The sequel, the three of the original characters returning now 10 years later. The original was set in 2013, the sequel 2024. So tell us a little bit, whatever you feel like telling us about the sequel.
Well, no, sure, absolutely. You know, as soon as I finished it, I knew I wanted to write another book. But there was that little thing called COVID in the middle of all of it.
Yeah.
And that just took away, I don't know about you, but all my kind of inspirational attempts to write. And over the years, I realized that at least three of these characters went on. The two main characters, the gay couple, Adriano and Lee, and then a third person, Magda, who for all intents and purposes, I think without giving away any of the story, could be described as a spy. She's a special assistant to the mayor of San Francisco, but we find out that her tentacles go worldwide. And 10 years after the events in Orvieto, Adriano and Lee find themselves aboard ship. Lee has been called back to his job that he did 20 years ago when he met his husband Adriano, writing the newspaper on board a cruise ship going around the world. And a murder takes place, without giving away the plot, and the solution to the murder is found in a tiny, tiny little southern Andalusian town in Spain called Grazalema. And like the events in Upon This Rock, this book is also inspired by a real-life incident, a really horrible massacre that took place during the beginning days of the Spanish Civil War. And it takes place this year in 2024, and that was specific because 3 of the characters are centenarians, people who remember the events as teenagers in 1937, and also one character who was a veteran of D-Day. And in the first part of the sequel to the book, you meet this character who is 103 years old, who was in the original wave going ashore at D-Day. And lest people think that someone who's 103 couldn't be that active, it's based on a real character, a gentleman that I met aboard ship, a 104-year-old gentleman named Stephen Melkinoff. You can Google him. He is one of the survivors of Normandy. I met him aboard the Queen Mary, and he volunteers his time for an organization called the Greatest Generation Foundation. And he goes around the world talking to schools about the experience of D-Day.
Wow, that's fabulous. And there were two other authors you've been collaborating with. I want to see if I can get this right. Dino Piacentini? Did I get that right?
Dino Piacentini. I worked with him at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts 30 years ago, and he has written a gorgeous, gorgeous book, very literary. Some people are describing the writing kind of like Toni Morrison. It's a coming-of-age story, but also it has a lot of mystical realism in it, and it's set on an island off the California coast, which is clearly inspired by Catalina. Just a beautifully written lyrical book. It's if you like the movie Pan's Labyrinth, it has a lot of those nuances, a story that's real but has a fantasy element. And then the other author that we are working with, David Church, a local Palm Springs author, has written a trilogy of books inspired by Thomas Edison. And I think the best way to describe them is it's Indiana Jones meets Star Wars. What can I say?
Wow.
These are 3 books that are just page-turners, and the sequel, the third of the trilogy, actually is in development now. It will be in print in April. And I just love both these authors because I'm a great believer that if you speak about your own books, you need to speak about other authors who you admire.
So let's talk a little bit about, when did you first start writing? Was this something that you started very young, or is it something in the last 10 or 15 years that you've sort of turned to?
Oh, my goodness. I literally started writing when I was 5 years old. I was very precocious, and I thought I was going to be a newspaper editor. I used to draw pictures of me sitting behind the desk at the Richmond Times-Dispatch in Richmond, Virginia. Okay. And then I went to college and studied theater and voice, which in retrospect was a way to, one, I think, help me get over the death of my mother when I was in my teens. My parents died young. And then also a way to come out of the closet. And then along the way, I also seriously considered joining the priesthood before I found myself writing for a number of magazines and newspapers on the East Coast. I wrote for American Theater. I wrote for The Advocate out here on the West Coast. I wrote for the San Francisco Examiner. I still write occasionally for the Desert Sun, for their society column. But all those years, I knew I wanted to write a novel. And in the 1980s, I wrote a novel about a young man dealing with the AIDS pandemic. And it got within 200 pages of being finished. It's in a drawer now, or I should say on my laptop, because back then in the 80s, if you were a young gay man like I was, there were no tests yet for HIV. I just had this weird, I know it sounds silly, but I thought if I finish the book, I'm going to die.
Wow.
And I never finished it. So I put it in a drawer, and I think now I can finish it. And the idea would be this character 40 years later has now come out of another pandemic, COVID, and writes about his experiences. Yeah. But I didn't expect to write Upon This Rock when I wrote it in 2014, the story of this real deacon who committed suicide, which is a true story, just fell into my lap, and I just became kind of obsessed with it, and the result is the book.
All right, we're going to take a quick break on the Desert Scene with David Perry. We'll be right back.
Craving a delicious meal that won't break the bank? Look no further than El Portal Mexican Restaurant in Cathedral City. At El Portal, we pride ourselves on offering family-friendly dining with affordable prices on our authentic Mexican cuisine. Owner Victor Lupercio and his dedicated staff make you feel like part of the family. Whether you choose to dine in, take out, or opt for delivery, you can always count on fresh, mouth-watering dishes that will transport you to the heart of Mexico. Enjoy discounts throughout the week and explore one of the Valley's best selections of tequila to complement your meal. Join us for live entertainment on Friday evenings and consider El Portal for your next special occasion with our catering services. Visit eatelportal.com for more details and discover why El Portal Mexican Restaurant restaurant has become a culinary gem in the desert. El Portal, located 1 block south of Ramon on Day Palm and Via Olivera.
And we're back with David Perry, author of Upon This Rock, a hugely successful mystery novel, and it's being shopped in Hollywood. I need to go back to something you said. You seriously consider the priesthood, and what steered you away from that ultimately?
Well, I think two things, and certainly one of the characters in Upon This Rock, Lee, the reason he becomes so obsessed with the suicide of this young cleric was he himself wanted to be a priest. My first 12 years of school, grade school and high school, were taught by Benedictine nuns and Benedictine monks. The last 4 years was actually a Catholic military school. The discipline was by the members of the U.S. Army, retired, and then the teaching was by the monks of Belmont Abbey, North Carolina. And I was a very devout Catholic boy. My mother's side of the family was Baptist. My father's side of the family was Catholic. I used to joke that my Baptist relatives didn't understand the Virgin Mary, bingo, or real wine at communion. And I spent several summers at Belmont Abbey, North Carolina. And I was really inspired by the dedication they had to education. And I seriously thought about becoming a monk. But around that time, I'm realizing that I'm a young gay man. And, well, as my husband, Alfredo, always joked, you'd have been a terrible monk. You couldn't have kept up with the vow of silence or celibacy.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about writing in general, since you've been doing it so long. What advice would you have for a young writer starting? I know one of the things you always hear is write what you know. But outside of that, what advice would you give?
Don't get down. Know that everyone has writer's block. Like I said, COVID for me was a huge writer's block. I could barely put together sentences. As you know, Bonnie, from following me, I love haiku. I try to write a haiku every day and sometimes post them on my Facebook page with beautiful pictures of Palm Springs, because I think if I can't write 17 syllables a day, I'm really in bad shape. So I would say to every writer, you have to write every day, even if it's only 17 syllables, even if it's only notes for something. Every day you have to get in the practice of doing something. And it's different for every writer. I know some writers who they sit down at 4 a.m. and they write for 3 hours. I don't write at the same time every day. I will say this, probably one of my habits which has helped me well is when I wake up in the morning, I often have really vivid dreams. I have my iPhone or my iPad right next to me, and I write down my dreams. Because they often serve as inspiration. So that's my personal practice, because I kind of wake up trying to be creative. But I would say write every day, one, and two, don't get down if you're having writer's block, because everyone does. And just keep on keeping on. You have to be persistent.
Yeah. Have you ever considered writing a completely nonfiction book?
Absolutely. When I wrote Upon This Rock, it was because my husband Alfredo and I were in this town of Orvieto for 3 months on sabbatical. We had taken 3 months off to get over the death of not one, not two, not three, but 4 good friends in less than a year, and we were kind of fried. And we turned over our PR business to a colleague. And for the first time in my life, I had 3 months just to write. And I was going to write a book on maritime history. And then I discovered this story that inspired Upon This Rock. So, yeah, one of the books that I have in the background that I keep working on, because, as you know, I lecture aboard ship. I love maritime history. I'm just a total ship geek. I want to write a book called Liner Lore and talk about the history of transatlantic travel. It'll bore most people to death, but if you're a ship person, hopefully you'll pick it up.
So how often you travel a lot, don't you? I mean, consistently.
We do. Yeah, and I'm always at pains when the people see pictures of us on these great cruises. I say, we didn't pay for that. We couldn't afford it. I'm very blessed. I worked for 2 years full-time aboard ship. I worked my way around the world in 1998 and 1999. And after that, the people that worked and managed several ship companies said, you're really a great speaker. Will you come on board and lecture? So once or twice a year, Alfredo and I get a free trip in exchange for me lecturing on maritime history. We just got back a month ago from the inaugural Atlantic crossing of Explora 2, a beautiful, beautiful cruise ship owned by the Italian MSC Cruises. So in the last year, let me tell you, travel has bounced back since COVID. Normally we get 1, maybe 2 free cruises. In the last less than 2 years, we've had 5.
Well, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are envious listening to this. Where would you like to go that you haven't been to yet?
Two places. Antarctica for me, because I've always been fascinated by it. And the other is a small independent kingdom near Nepal called Mustang in the Himalayas. It's very remote, and Alfredo has always been fascinated by it. And I'm hoping in the next 3 years we can get there. Those are two places that I've never been. I've been to 72 countries now.
Wow.
And Alfredo and I tend to spend 1 or 2 months a year working from Spain. We run our PR business from Spain, visiting his family. But Antarctica and Mustang are high on my list.
Now, do you have, or you may not want to share this, do you have a title for the sequel yet, or would you rather not?
I do.
Share.
I do. It's called Thorns of the 15 Roses. And the reason is, in the beginning stages of the Spanish Civil War, there were 15 women who were brutally tortured and massacred by the fascists loyal to Francisco Franco. And they were killed not because they had done anything, but because their husbands or boyfriends or fathers were anti-fascist fighters. And the fascists couldn't get to the men, so they killed the women in this little town. And they are known in this little town, which we have visited now, I think 6 times, as the 15 Roses. So the book is dedicated to them. The book is fiction, but it is inspired by this horrible massacre.
Yeah. So tell people where they can get both the book Upon This Rock and then down the road the sequel. Where can they get them?
Well, you can go online to, I now have my own author page, davideugene.perry.com. davidperry.com is my PR business, but if you go to davideugene.perry.com, you have all the links there for Goodreads and Amazon. I use my full name because David Perry is a very common name. There's a gazillion David Perrys.
Yeah.
But so far, I've only found one other David Eugene Perry. So now I use my middle name, which during my childhood I didn't like very much.
So, and it's Perry, Perry, just so people know. David Eugene,
Correct.
Perry. Well, David, congratulations. I mean, it's a wonderful book. I read it several years ago, but it was terrific. I think it's going to make a great movie. Continued success, and thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Bonnie, for really keeping us up to date on what's going on at Coachella Valley. We appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, David Perry, and we'll see the rest of you the next time on The Desert Scene.
The Desert Scene with Bonnie G. Meet the stars and feel the beat. From the Coachella Valley, it's the place to be. For all the culture, fun, and harmony. The Desert Scene, yeah, with Bonnie G. The Desert Scene's where you belong with Mutual Broadcasting's Bonnie G. Just sing along. Just sing along.